Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you for coming to our event, Architecting for Growth, How to Manage the Cloud Through the Startup Growth Event, which is in partnership with OVHcloud and their partnership and their startup program. As most of you know, we are Silicon Roundabout, the largest tech community in Europe, 14,000 members and counting. And we're really happy all of you could join us today. As most of you know, we regularly host meetup events with our various channel partners like OVH. And if you'd like to hear more about us, you can check out our Silicon Roundabout community page or meetup group. Now, to start off the event, I'd like to introduce the event moderator for today, Philip, who will be moderating the event and talking on behalf of OVH, as well as all the services that they have. Just a general reminder for everyone, the event agenda for today would be as follows. As you can see, we'll have, there's a quick intro by me, followed by an introduction from Philip, who will introduce all the other attendees, during which, if you have any questions during the event, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A section or the chat section. And all those questions will be answered at the very end of the session with an audience Q&A. Before the audience Q&A, we will also be having the live demo event. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Philip to introduce all our guests.
Thanks, Rita. Great to be here. Welcome to this Architecting for Growth panel discussion on how to manage the cloud through the various startup growth phases. As you heard, I'm Philip Murray, and I've been working with startups now for more than 20 years, which is about as long as OVHcloud has been operating. As you heard, I'm currently running the OVHcloud startup program in UK, Ireland, and Northern Europe. And for those of you that don't know, OVHcloud is a leading European cloud provider. In preparation for this panel, I was thinking about the similarities between an entrepreneur and the technology they use. And you know what the conclusion I came to? Well, they both move really fast, and tomorrow might need a whole new direction. And you know, I think that really sits at the heart of what the discussion today is, that this speed, this unpredictability creates pain for you as an entrepreneur, for you as a developer. And the cloud in itself can relieve some of that pain by providing huge flexibility, scalability, and cost savings for you as a startup or a scale-up, which explains why there's an expected more than 23% growth in the use of public cloud in 2021 alone. But the cloud creates other pains for you. OVHcloud, we're certainly trying to relieve those pains with, you know, for example, creating interoperability as much as possible for you. Our startup program looks to, you know, solve your technical issues as soon as possible to make life easier. But some of the pains that we want to touch on today with this panel relate to things like, do you choose from managed services or do you do it yourself? Do you choose proprietary solutions or open standard solutions? Do you start simply and re-architect, or do you start with a future in mind? Things like hybrid cloud and multi-cloud solutions, backup and disaster recovery. We want to touch on these issues. As I said earlier, technology is moving fast, and you know, you might need to tap into different solution providers to get and cloud providers to get the solutions that you need. How do you do that? And also data security and sovereignty requirements. There's quite hefty penalties these days if you're not compliant. And so we've got a myriad of options that you have to deal with, and we've got a great panel here to share their insights today. As you heard, on top of the discussion, we're also going to do a demo, a hybrid cloud demo, and you'll also be hearing more about how to access free cloud credits for your startup. Please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to answer those either directly or within the discussion or towards the end. But yes, without further ado, let me now introduce our panel. So we've got Samson Sun, Product Marketing Manager for Public Cloud at OVHcloud. We've also got Yit Errol, founder and CEO of Fitzy, and he's an experienced technical founder. We've got Gus Barrett, Director of Verso, and they've got a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud management platform, which really touches on some of the points that I mentioned earlier. We've got Amet Momakaya, co-founder and head of development at Ant Media, and they've started and scaled on the OVHcloud. In fact, all three of these businesses have either been in the startup program or currently in our OVHcloud startup program. So let's get straight into the questions. I'm going to start with you, Samson. If you can briefly introduce yourself and then also give us a quick overview, from your perspective, what does the typical modern cloud architecture look like?
So hello everyone, I'm a product marketing manager at OVHcloud, and I work mainly on public cloud products such as managed Kubernetes service, public cloud instances, etc. And in short, I develop marketing strategies and plans to communicate the features and benefits of our product to customers. And just for you to know, before OVHcloud, I worked for big consulting companies. And I already help companies to move to the cloud before OVHcloud. So I may know one thing or two about moving to the cloud. And so what I observe in the last few years is that the trend and the popularity of what we call cloud native applications, and with that all the best practice around this kind of architecture. And I would say first, companies and startups want to do cloud native application because it can deliver rapidly, innovate faster, and integrate, how can I say, customer feedbacks into products, and all of that with more agility. And this is now key to have more market shares. And I would say this kind of cloud native architecture is defined first by the use of containers, and I would say microservices oriented. And all of that is possible because it's automated with Kubernetes. And after that, we also see that there is globally a trend to automate the whole process of from development to deployment, and this is what we call the CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous deployment. And with that, all the DevOps practices. So this is there is a lot, of marketing terms, I would say, but the point is to very accelerate the time to market for companies, and you have a lot of technologies such as Kubernetes, infrastructure as code like Terraform, Ansible, and this is what we observe right now in the use of cloud native ecosystem.
Thanks, Samson. Yeah, I think our demo is going to include a use of Terraform as well, right?
Absolutely.
No, good. That's thanks for the introduction there. Yet moving on to you, one of the problems I see with startups is that they don't necessarily have the skills to go fully containerized, as Samson mentioned from the start. Do you suggest starting simply and then re-architecting, or building for the future from the start? What are your thoughts?
Well,
and yeah, sorry, also give yourself a brief introduction as well.
Myself first, yes. My name is Yit Errol, and I'm the founder of Fitzy. Fitzy is a conversational business assistant that basically enables any form of data to be queried in a conversational way. Hopefully, it will change the way we interact with our data and dashboards going forward. Myself, I'm coming from an engineering background, 17, 18 years of working in enterprise software. So work with so many different technologies, so many different architectures so far. Even with my current startup, to be honest, we just started as fast as possible and try to get things up and running. as early as possible to be able to prototype and demo and basically get feedback short term. But looking back again, we started without containerizing our solution. Our system is made up of more than 10 separate, distributed servers in total. And when you start deploying into a production-like environment, development-wise, it's all fine working locally. But when you start deploying, then you start experiencing the pain actually. Setting up instances, configuring them, and then uploading your code in there, running it, and making sure it's up and running, monitoring it, and then any exception, any errors, if it crashes, just restarting, and then you keep changing your code, pushing it again and again. It just takes a lot of time and effort just to have your code deployed somewhere. When you use container images from day one, which isn't really that much of a hassle to start with. It takes only maybe a day, a few hours to set up your project, containerize your project. It makes it so easy to configure. When you set up a new instance, new VM, then all you need to do is just install Docker and then just push it there or update it there with 1 or 2 commands. It's all done for you. So it makes it a lot easier, basically. So I would rather start from day one with a containerized solution just to have consistency and flexibility and save time, basically, which is equal to money these days, right?
All right. No, great. That's interesting. And specifically from a container point of view, what are you using in terms of technology?
Currently, we are mostly JavaScript based, but also have AI and NLP servers based on Python. They are all containerized. We also have logging systems as well, and they're all containerized and deployed on OVH infrastructure currently, playing nicely with each other and performing exceptionally well as well. We can easily manage our resources this way too. We can clearly see how much memory or CPU, etc., we need. Networking wise, again, quite happy with the way things are tied together and deployed on OVH currently.
Okay, and that's Dockers or Kubernetes or
Docker? Yeah.
All right. Okay, great. No, thanks for that. So the message from Yet is to get those skills and rather start with a containerized solution, go more cloud native from the start. Matt, moving on to you, tell us a bit about yourself, and also how did you manage cost versus performance in terms of cloud as your business has developed? Taking into account obviously, the one side is the technology, but the other side is the cost.
Yeah.
The technology is going to help with the performance, but how do you kind of balance these two?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, this is Ahmed from Ant Media. I'm one of the co-founder of the company, and I'm taking role in development. My major role is development, and I also take role in business as well. So the Ant Media and the Ant Media server is actually a scalable real-time streaming engine. So in the early days, there is no user, there is no customer, and there's only cost, so that you can pay for salaries, for other stuff. So in the early days, we get some credits from OVH. So it is a very good for us, because when we have some credits from OVH in different levels, as far as I remember, we try to sell our solution as a managed service. So, and it is very good for us because we make some money. It improves our motivation. And also it is very good for us. We use credit, so everything is going into our pocket. And it is also good for us because we see the problems in action, and we just see how it is working, what is the problem in that phase, and how the users encountering some problems. So it will be very easy for us to debug the issues. So after that, it scales well, and we have some kind of automations for that. But when the credits is over, when we just no credits in cloud provider OVH, so then we need to pay for OVH, and the cost will increase. And also there are some other cloud providers that we need to pay for them as well, and they are also charging for the data transfer. But luckily, OVHcloud does not charge for the data transfer. So we stay on the OVHcloud, and we see that in a real-time streaming engine, it is okay. But if we provide a managed service, there is too much cloud cost, and there are too many competitors in the market. But our main goal is making a very robust and a packaged version of a scalable streaming engine, which means that you can deploy it to any platform. It is very easy to deploy, and it is very easy to scale. So then we will switch our business model from providing a managed service to a mostly license-based service, and we are getting our product be compatible with the cloud providers, and we are putting our images in marketplaces, in several cloud providers marketplaces. It is available, and we also would like to appear in the OVHcloud marketplace when it is ready. It will be very good for us, by migrating from a managed service to a license-based service, it is a controversial issue. So I mean, there is too much controversial in this topic. But the good thing is that we can make our competitors as our users. So right now we are selling our product to some of the real-time streaming engine services. I mean, they provide platform as a service or communication platform as a service, and they use Ant Media Server in their infrastructure. So right now, Ant Media Server is using more than 120 countries. There is more than 3,500 instances running worldwide. And lastly, Ant Media is one of the top live streaming solution. It's selected by a magazine. I'm just putting link on the chat window. So I think it's okay for my side, but I think I have a question for you, Philip. So may I ask?
Yeah, sure, thanks.
Okay, so the question is that we are providing a streaming solution, and in the streaming, data transfer is too much. And the data transfer costs too much in other cloud providers. On the other side, in OVHcloud, it is free, and its quality is also very good. So how do you succeed that? How can you do that? Could you please tell me?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, it really comes down more to values. Obviously, we've had to do the math to make sure that it's viable for us, but and it is. But it really comes down to values and also the product that we want to offer, and that's what we call a smart cloud, and it's an acronym for a few things. So S stands for simple. So we want it to be easy to use, and we want your even your billing to be simple, right? So hence now you're not having to worry about bandwidth costs. That makes your bill simpler, and I'll explain that a bit more later on. But from in terms of M's in smart, we're talking about multi-local. So we've got worldwide data centers with local teams. A stands for accessibility. So we want to have a broad range of products and services, and we actually see that attracting startups to our program. And then reversibility, I mentioned interoperability earlier on. We want our customers to be able to move away from us if it doesn't make sense for them, to be able to use multiple clouds and to use, so we adopt open standards as much as possible. And then the most important one in terms of bandwidth is transparent. So we want transparency in terms of our products, in terms of our pricing, And so we don't charge for bandwidth because it removes that variability in your bill, which means no surprises. What you see, products you choose is what you're going to pay for. And yeah, that's the reason for,
So,
yeah,
I mean,
for the main reason why we don't.
Okay, so I understand that you provide data transfer for free because just only for the sake of your users, yeah? Or...
Yes.
Okay, it's a good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thanks for that, Ahmet. Gus, let's pick up with you now. One of the questions I mentioned earlier was that, whether to use managed services or do it yourself, and one or two of the panelists have already touched on it, but tell us about yourself and what do you think about this, and did this change along the different growth phases for you at all?
Sure, and thanks for inviting me to the panel, Philip. So first of all, hi, Gus Barrett, director at the Versa Group of companies, and we've been building a platform over the last 3 or 4 years called Cloud Activate. And fundamentally, what we are trying to give other customers is exactly what we've deployed out on. So coming to the question, would we go managed services in the early days or not? The question is double-barreled or has two edges to the sword. The thing is, if you have the in-house expertise and you have the skill sets, then absolutely do it yourself. It's more cost-effective, and then you can keep the skill sets locally. If, however, you have an idea or you're more of a software engineer, but you don't know how to architect the cloud or the networking or the security, then definitely give that contract that out as a managed services provider until you have the skill set. And sometimes it's cheaper to use the managed service providers such as ourselves to do it all for you, because by the time you failed a few times or tried or been despondent, or the amount of costs that can be incurred in trying to do some of the elements yourself is extortionate. So there isn't a one-sided answer to it, Philip. But it is, if you can, absolutely keep it in-house, keep it as your own IP. But the stuff that you are not good at, give it to the people who are. Yeah.
All right. No, I think that's another argument for skilling yourself up, particularly if you think it's going to save you time and money in the long run. But it's good to yes. Have you got some input on that?
Yeah, I have just my 2 cents on this. From, again, my experience, I would rather go for managed service as much as possible, because the cost of, when you go to production, you have to have your systems up and running all the time. And in order to make sure that it's running, when you do it manually, you have to keep an eye on it consistently, constant 7/24. That's a lot of effort, and you have to hire at least 2 or 3 people to cover those shifts and have automate everything yourself to make sure the system provides you with alerts and notifications, etc. when something goes wrong. When you offload that to a managed service, you know that it will work unless your code crashes, basically, which again, it will let you know immediately, but their job is to keep it up and running for you. So you won't have to pay at least 2 or 3 salaries to make sure that server is running. In the long term, it saves you a lot of money, I think, from my experience, really. So I'd strongly suggest managed services as much as possible.
True, and I agree. I mean, there are some items, especially when it comes to infrastructure, Philip, such as what OVH are providing their customers, that should definitely be run by an infrastructure house such as yourself. I mean, trying to build it in a rack in the back of your cupboard while you're trying to build these things out and keep an eye on it is just not going to be very conducive. So yes, I agree with you.
And DevOps engineers cost a lot of money as well.
All right, so you need to kind of look at your tech stack, decide where the key areas are, and staying with you, Yet, in terms of choosing solutions, what are your feelings around proprietary versus open standard solutions when you're looking at your tech stack?
We tried so many different technologies in order to get to our end goal. And again, looking back, it all comes down to one point, and this is extremely important. It's all about the support and community you can get when you're choosing a technology. If you go with a proprietary solution, maintenance and fixing issues and looking after it and configuring everything is on you. You don't get help for the most part, and that's essential. It costs you a lot of time and effort. When you go with open standards, generally they are extremely well documented, and there is always a community behind it. So you can get help from so many even unexpected channels, really, because everyone is trying to work around that, with that community support each other to make sure that open standards actually it stays as standard and is used as much as possible. So the technologies we use in making data talk, if you will, was challenging, and we have experienced, we used so many different technologies that did not come with any form of documentation, help or support or community behind it, and it was a real struggle. I would strongly suggest going with open standards wherever you can, unless you really don't have any other choice that you have to take it to your own.
That's an interesting take on open standards. So not only the interoperability benefit, but also actually a support benefit, that it's actually easier to get help on something that's open standard. That's great. That's great. All right, Samson, let's get back to you. You know, all this really comes down to data. How should startups manage, for example, things like data sovereignty requirements, you know, even certification requirements if they have them? Any thoughts on that?
So it's I would say following what had been said about, you know, managed service. So there is something when you delegate your data to companies, that there's also a data managed, and there's a security part in that. We for the different for the data of our customers, for example, in OVHcloud, the UK data center, we make sure obviously that we involve we secure the hosting and the data transfer, and we also involve how can I say, local team of OVHcloud there. And more globally about the security, I would say about the infrastructure, we are committed to ensure optimal security for the data and the infrastructure it hosts. And so that's why in this work to manage the security and the sovereignty of the data, we have a lot of certifications, the PCI DSS certification, the SOC 1 Type 2, the SOC 1 Type 1 and 1 Type 2, and you know, everything ISO 27001. And obviously, since we are a European company, we are compliant with the GDPR, and we are not concerned by the US Cloud Act, since even if we have a US data center, it is managed by a separate and autonomous entity called OVH US. So that's how we are not impacted by the Cloud Act. And so this is this constant work also on the legal part, on the security part, and we also provide tools for our customers, you know, to handle security on the site, because we can secure the infrastructure, but at the end, the security is in the application too, and so that's why it's important, you know, to provide tools to the startups for them to handle that, and outside of that, maybe if we product in the future, we ensure the reversibility of our infrastructure. So when there is an infrastructure that is built on OVHcloud, it can be migrated in any open standard infrastructure and the data with it.
No, thanks, Samson. A whole bunch of important points touched on there, kind of understanding, you know, how your provider is going to work with your data. Do they follow best practices in terms of security and data protection? what laws apply to your data. You mentioned the Cloud Act, and where is your data actually stored, because that's obviously going to affect which laws apply to that. So that's interesting stuff to consider with, and yeah, maybe not always something that a startup really wants to think about. So definitely food for thought. No, great. Guys, I'd like to move on to a new topic. When did obviously, well, we're still on data really, because it's now about it's protecting it. When did backup and disaster recovery become a mission critical issue for your business, and how do you see it changing through the different stages as you develop?
Absolutely, and thanks, Philip. Yes, so when in the early days when we were building the code, I mean, we went through the full evolution of starting small, putting it on VPS systems, then growing it onto larger, trying to go onto bare metal, and then putting it into private cloud. But as soon as you have something tangible as a startup, as soon as you can see your code forming into something, having a backup of it is beyond critical, and not just a backup, going back an hour, a day, a month, and seeing what is wrong with it. I mean, when we connected, all of a sudden we had the most amazing amount of people trying to find out what was behind or inside our systems, and at one point we were getting DDoS attacks of 1 million a day. So if they'd got access to that information and you'd lost all of your IP, it would have been devastating. But more importantly, as soon as we went into beta, as into launch, which has only recently happened, we keep data backups not only on-prem but in a separate network and in a separate geolocation, all with OVH, I must admit, because they make it very easy in the way that you can connect your VRACs in from different geolocations and bring your data back. But it's a staged approach, because obviously the more servers you allocate for your backup, or you have snapshots on-prem, the more cost there is. So you phase into it, the more confident you are that your startup is becoming something that's going from pre-phase to launch. So yeah, it's not something that please don't install the staircase or the fire staircase once the fire has happened. Please install your backups as you grow, because if it's gone, it's gone, or if it's corrupted, you're in big trouble. Yeah.
And you kind of spoke about backup, and how do you differentiate that from disaster recovery, and rationalize it as a startup?
Yeah, so from a startup, from an OVH point of view, I can give any startup that's on this call some really good advice. OVH give 0.5 terabytes with a backup per VM, free of charge. It sort of takes you back to the day before. At least you got your information and all those good things. But when the two main drivers are what is known in the industry as RPO and RTO, which is your recovery point objective and your recovery time objective. And a recovery point is at what point can you go back to in a failure? Is it a minute? Is it 10 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it a day? So how far can you sustain a failure? And recovery time objective is how fast can you get that information up and running and back into production. So for example, if you have an update and it's a day old, but you can bring it, you throw all your engineering in it at an hour, all that you've got is code that's a day old, but you've been offline globally for an hour. And the closer you want that down to minutes, the more you have to architect and engineer that capability in live failover. And oddly enough, with OVH, if you use the cloud platform, we can geolocate the same infrastructure in the UK and in Germany, and you could have a sustained data center failure here, and still the end user customer experience will be perfect. You wouldn't even have noticed that a data center blew up. We can script it down to 2 seconds on OVH infrastructure. Yeah.
Is this using your platform?
Yes, it is using our platform, but it's
Yeah.
it's using native tools and capability within your infrastructure in order for us to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. No, brilliant. No, thanks for those insights. We're starting to now talk about multiple locations, and so now we start thinking, looking at things like hybrid clouds and multi-clouds as well. In your architectures, Ahmet, I don't know if you can give us some insight into how you've considered hybrid and multi-cloud, not from a backup and recovery point of view, but more from a solution architect point of view, and what advantage did you find with that?
Yeah, we have used multi-cloud in several architectures. For instance, just let me give you the exact use case. We have a user and he's making an auction, live auction, and his origin is in Paris. But his audience is in United States, and in Asia, Singapore. And for this case, we created a solution in Paris to ingest the stream, and also we put some kind of edge instances in United States and in Singapore. So they will provide you a good network structure. So if a user is in United States, he will be forwarded to the US instances, and if he is in Singapore or close to Singapore, then he is forwarded to that instances. In this architecture, we use OVH for the instances. I mean, because in the infrastructure, there is a good connection speed in this same cloud. For instance, the Paris to States, or probably your data data center is Canada, probably, as far as I remember. Or
yes, that's right.
You also, yeah. So there will be a good network connection in the same cloud provider, and we see a latency such as 200 milliseconds or something like that between the origin and the edge, end-to-end latency. The thing is that in this architecture, we also need to use load balancing according to the geography. So for the load balancing side, we use another cloud provider DNS service for that. This is exactly one use case that we use for some of our users. And another mostly the use case that we encounter is that, for instance, we use OVH for the instances, and because and data transfer is free, so users prefer to use OVH for decreasing the cost. But on the other hand, they use some other cloud provider storage, S3 storage. So in these cases, users just stream through OVH instances, but store the data in other S3 compatible platform. As you know, that there are some other platforms that uses S3 as a storage. So I mean, we use cloud providers for a specific functions. Storage for someone, instances for other one, for DNS for other one. We can use different functions in different cloud providers, and it will provide probably the best user experience, or addresses our users' requirements.
No, great. No, thanks for that interesting use case. I think you're referring to our private network between our data centers called VRAC, which would which will also be part of the demo that Samson's going to show us a little bit later on. No, marvelous. So I think we've obviously touched on this kind of multi-cloud. Gus, you mentioned your solution that can help with this, but I'm thinking startup, and I'm thinking trying to save money. Is some kind of a multi-cloud platform really cost effective? Is it viable for a startup or a scale-up?
Absolutely. So I mean, the thing that most people don't do or don't know how to do is how to use multi-cloud features all the time. So what we have done in our platform is allowed people to basically click and deploy. The thing with Cloud Activate is it's a managed automation platform. It takes best practices, blueprints, and automates them. So you don't need a AWS architect engineer. You don't need a VMware engineer. You know, you're going, I need this sort of application running on a resource that is this big, and I want it like I'm putting it. I need it in the US or I need it in a local country, and you click and deploy and shoot it at that particular asset that you need, and it brings up all of the costings in each aspect. Now, for us, we put all of our stuff in a private cloud, which is really expensive, but there are a whole bunch of services that we use that are, you know, like virtual private services or even Kubernetes, which have different functions, and all of those items are needed in order to produce a cohesive platform. Some are for DevOps, some we're using for load balancers and front-end WAF systems, and so you're beginning to use not only multi-cloud but multiple capabilities within each cloud. You know, they're not necessarily part of the same thing. So yes, the problem is people find it very complex to manage. You know, what's server one sitting on cloud two with. I mean, because what we can do is we can put a CPU in AWS with the storage in Azure, with the backup in GCP, and the recovery in OVH, all for the same server. You know, and trying to keep track of 100 servers that are doing the same is impossible. So you do need a platform that can automate that. So keeping the cost down and using the correct resource and asset for its function is very important to us, but not at the detriment of being innovative or finding it difficult to do, or costs is our point of view. Yes. No,
great. That's amazing. Let's take a bit of a break from panel questions for a bit, and Samuelson, if I can ask you to show this demo first, or explain sort of what it's about, and then run the demo for us. That'll be great. And just a reminder to the audience to please put your questions into the Q&A section, and we'll be picking up those questions after the demo. Brilliant. Over to you, Samson.
Yeah, so in this demo, we will show you how with Terraform we can automate the deployment of discovery instances. So this is our entry-level instances, and how we automate the VRAC deployment. And we will see the manager, but also the Horizon Web UI, which is the web UI of OpenStack. And we'll see the relative information of all that, and we'll ping the different instances and how is VRAC is reacting. So I will share with you my screen.
So VRAC again is this private network that connects these two instances in different locations effectively, so that the audience will get a feel for how you're effectively doing this yourself with Terraform.
Yes. Okay. So can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, I will launch just the video. Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this demonstration about private network and public cloud instances. Let's start with how it will be done and what I will use. So here I will use Terraform. It's a client who lets you deploy automatically instances, network resources to different cloud providers. I start to initialize the process to check that I have all the credentials required and everything. Then here, the next step is to apply. Terraform will read the configuration files and start to build what I asked him to do. So it's 2 instances with 1 public IP each, 1 private IP each. And to connect these private IPs, they will be inside the OVHcloud VRAC, the private network. I use yes, and then it starts creating the resources I asked. The creation process is now almost done, and we will be able to check what's been done. So let's use an alias I created to check what OpenStack created on behalf of Terraform. So here we can see that we have public IP and private IP inside the private network. That's what I wanted. Inside my folder, I had my Terraform configuration files. So we can see inside the private network one that it's corresponding to what I wanted. It should have started with .100 and ended by 200. And my private IPs are inside this range. So everything's good so far. Let's check what has been created inside the pure OpenStack dashboard called Horizon. If I sort the instances by type, we can see that we have two instances, the discoveries, the one I just created. So we have the exploitation system. We have an SSH key inside to let you connect to the freshly created instances. And you have many more information about public IPs, private, and configuration. Right now, it could be interesting to test if this configuration is right. So yeah, that's what I asked. My personal key is pushed inside these instances to let me connect inside it. So right now, let's test the connection. I will SSH to the first discovery instance using its public IP, this one, and I will use the Ubuntu account. So let's SSH Ubuntu at my first public IP, and let's see what we have inside. So first I validated key exchange. So right now we can see that it worked. And right now I'm inside the first instances created. So let's sudo into root to have more options. And then here I can check the network configuration. We can see that I have my public IP corresponding to what OpenStack told me. And I have here my private IP. So everything looks very good so far. And now I will try to ping the second instance private IP to check if the VRAC private network connection is working. And yes, it's definitely working. And the interesting thing here is that all the bandwidth inside private network between these instances will be included inside the billing. So it's pretty nice to know. Now let's check how the information is displayed inside the Horizon portal for the networks. We can see here that we have the private network item, it's active, up, and we have the subnet configuration. So now everything is set up to be able to deploy new instances inside the private network and use all its functionalities.
All right, is that it? Thanks, Samson. Any kind of summary comments on that, or can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's great to see the automation coming through from the different platforms. So yeah, it's just nice to see how simple it can be if you want it to be.
No, brilliant. We do have a question that's come through from the audience, aimed at Yit, Amit, and Gus. How did the three of you decide, obviously not together, on a cloud service that works for you? Did you do it in-house before, or were you on another cloud provider? Yit, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. My journey was a bit on the painful side. It was mostly trial and error, to be honest. Evaluated DigitalOcean, Google Cloud, Firebase, and AWS, OVH, for so many different things, so many different platforms, really. And it was always about understanding, learning, documentation, reading, and then deciding if it's the right one, and then implementing a prototype and see if it works. But seeing it work does not necessarily mean that it is actually good enough. It needs to perform as well. just to give you an example, most of the things we started with, initially we started with Google Cloud Platform, and pretty much everything we deployed there was not performing. It was easy enough, but it wasn't performing well. Hardware was always there was a constraint. Basically, it was not fast enough, basically. And then we started investing in other options and using OVH system, OVH instances for our AI NLP system provided the best performance based on that requirement. On the other hand, we are still using Cloudflare, for example, for our proxying request, and that's the one performing well for data pass-through for a lot of things. So you need to basically try and see what works for you. It's a journey at the end of the day, and as a startup you have to evolve constantly. Try, see if it works, try something else if it doesn't, and finally, when you're happy with it, then you can keep it there and look further for other functionality, other features. It's a painful journey. It's not easy. There's no one answer, basically.
No, thanks, Yet. Ahmed?
Yeah, it's a good question for us. So in our project, generally, there are two things is very important. One of them is the CPU performance, and the other one is the network performance. So in the early days, we know that the CPU is critical, but we don't have much information about the network quality. So actually, we choose the cloud provider according to our experience and according to our customer experiences. For instance, for the CPU, after we have some experience and some complaints from users, we learn how to do that. And generally, right now, we just compare the benchmark results from different cloud providers, and we see that how the instances or virtual machines performing in that instances they are same or they are different. So and it will give us a good information about the CPU performance. CPU is critical for us because the real-time streaming is a complex protocol and it requires processing power. And the second critical thing is the network quality. I mean, there are some cost-effective cloud providers that cost low for the data transfer, but their network quality QoS is not very good. I mean, some of our users just see a huge amount of delay in the stream. And when we just take a look at the instances, everything is performing well. CPU usage is, let's say, 30% or something like that, but the latency is increasing to 20 seconds or something like that. So, and after that, we make some other tests to measure the network latency before we make any kind of decision to use a specific cloud provider. So right now, our solution is compatible with the cloud providers, and it can be used in AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, or some other OVH or some other platforms, and we just give some advantages and disadvantages of the cloud providers to our users and the best practices for them. So we did it in a house, and we almost have experience in lots of cloud providers. Yeah.
No, thanks. Very interesting. Just the complexity in terms of not, looking at the raw kind of hardware level, the network level, and as we've heard today, the software level as well, in terms of whether it's open source, proprietary, managed or not, and your skill levels have all got to be taken into account. Gus, your experience?
I'm going to echo Yigit and go experimentary and painful. It was we went
Yeah.
you try everything, and you have a lot of failures until you find what works, and the trick is to fail fast.
Yeah.
Don't stick with it. If it doesn't work, chuck it out, try something else. And yes, don't get stubborn. Don't have a problem failing and it not working. Yeah.
Let me add this. It's like finding the love of your life in a way. There are so many parameters that has to match your particular expectations. It's not easy.
No, that's an interesting analogy. We started off with an analogy of comparing entrepreneurs and technology, and we're ending off comparing on technology with marriage. But yeah, I think that's a good point to end the conversation. Thanks very much, everyone. I think the word that stuck out for me is the word experimentation, and I think that's where I'd like to come in with a bit more around the startup program, because really that's what the OVHcloud startup program provides. It gives you that opportunity to experiment with our cloud with our free cloud credits. So I put up, I've shared my screen now where you can see the URL to go and sign up. There's no strings attached, no cost for you. We give 10,000 euro in cloud credits for startups and up to 100,000 euro for scale-ups. It's a simple online application process. Click on apply. You create a customer account like any customer would, and then there's a few additional questions around you as a startup. And then within a week, you'll hear about whether your application is accepted. And you agree to an online contract, and your credits get issued to you as a payment method in your manager, and then you can go ahead and start, creating products with those, or purchasing products with those credits, and setting up your architecture. And yeah, we'll personally onboard you and find out more about your tech needs, and then also look at connecting you with a solution architect to help make sure that you make best use of our cloud. So that's some of the personal service that we add, also helping with solving your technical issues as well as fast as possible, like I mentioned earlier. So yeah, that's very much all from me. Thanks again very much to the panel. Thanks for the participants for joining us. My email address is there if you want to email me. I know Rita's also got all of our email addresses. I think she'll be sharing those. So I'm going to hand back to you now, Rita, just to wrap up the session.
Thanks, Burp, and thanks to the panel, thanks to the attendees. I just have to say, I don't know about the attendees, but I found it very interesting, at least for myself. And hopefully we can hopefully see some of our startups from the community with OVH as well. However, thanks to everyone for joining in, and it was really interesting to hear each of your point of view, because from previous events, we've heard these questions time and time again on how they picked it. So it's honestly been very interesting. Thank you to everyone, and thanks to the attendees for joining in. As we mentioned, we're Silicon Roundabout, and we have events every month. So please do join in. Our next event is for startups who want to learn about the difference between advisory boards versus your board members. What is the difference? That's being hosted tomorrow with Connected. But more than anything, thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you at other events. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.